Please, sir, anything helps. God bless you. The man in the tailored suit did not even slow down, but the woman behind him did. She stopped dead in her tracks, her briefcase slipping from her fingers. The elderly woman sat on the scorching sidewalk, her trembling hands gripping a cardboard sign like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her skin was sun-cracked and weathered, her eyes clouded with age, but there was something in her face, something soft and familiar like a lullaby you forgot you knew. The man in the suit froze. His face went pale because he recognized her, but she looked right through him like he was just another stranger. That elderly woman on the sidewalk had once saved his life, and what he was about to do for her would uncover a secret that had been buried for many years. Join me as we dive into this powerful story. But before we do, people told me this channel would never make it, that nobody watches stories like these anymore. I want you and me to prove them wrong. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs it. Thank you. Now, let us dive in. The penthouse sat high in the tallest building in Buckhead, floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble, a kitchen that could feed 20, and every single night Reed Harlan ate dinner alone. He was one of the most successful men in Atlanta, CEO of Harlan Development Group, a real estate empire he had built from nothing. His name was on luxury condos, shopping centers, and office towers stretching from Georgia to the Carolinas. His net worth had more zeros than most people could count. Magazines called him a visionary. Business journals called him a genius, but nobody called him at night. His phone would ring all day. Investors, lawyers, board members, but in the evenings, silence. The kind of silence that fills a room like fog, the kind that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Reed would come home, loosen his tie, and stand in his massive living room, staring out at the Atlanta skyline. The city glittered below him like a sea of diamonds. Beautiful, cold, just like his life. He had no wife, no children, no close friends. He had business partners who respected him and employees who feared him, but not a single person on this earth who truly knew him. His refrigerator was always full. His housekeeper made sure of that. Organic everything, imported cheeses, fresh fruit flown in from California. But there was nobody to cook for, nobody to share a meal with, nobody to ask how his day went. Most nights he ate standing up at the kitchen counter, a plate of whatever was easiest. Sometimes he did not eat at all. He would just pour a glass of whiskey and sit in the dark watching the lights of the city blink like distant stars. People envied Reed Harlan. They saw the suits, the cars, the penthouse. They saw a man who had conquered the world. They did not see the boy who still lived inside him, the boy who had grown up with nothing, the boy who had lost everything before he was even a teenager, the boy who had been saved by a woman whose name he whispered to himself sometimes late at night when the silence got too heavy. Miss Pearl. He had not seen her in many years. He had tried to find her once back when he first made his money. Hired a private investigator, but the trail went cold. She had vanished like smoke, and Reed had told himself it was fine. He had moved on. He had built something extraordinary out of the wreckage of his childhood. But moving on and healing are not the same thing. And Reed Harlan had never healed. He had just learned to function around the wound. Every success felt hollow. Every milestone felt empty because the one person who had taught him what it meant to matter, the one person who had made him believe he could be somebody, was gone. And he had never gotten the chance to say thank you. That thought followed him everywhere. Through boardrooms and business dinners, through penthouse parties and charity galas, it sat in the back of his mind like a splinter he could not reach. He had everything a man could want, and none of it was enough. Because the thing he wanted most was not something money could buy. He wanted to find Miss Pearl, and he was starting to believe he never would. But life has a way of giving you exactly what you need at exactly the moment you least expect it. And Reed Harlan was about to discover that sometimes the people you have been searching for are closer than you think. To understand why that elderly woman on the sidewalk meant so much to him, you need to go back, way back, to a small apartment in East Atlanta, where the walls were thin and the winters were cold, and where a little boy learned the most important lesson of his life. Reed was very young when his father left. He did not remember much about the man, just a deep voice, the smell of motor oil, and then one morning an empty chair at the kitchen table. His mother Vivian never talked about it. She just got up the next day and went to work. 2 jobs, 6 days a week, cleaning offices in the morning, waitressing at a diner until close. She would come home after midnight, her feet swollen, her eyes hollow, and she would check on Reed sleeping in his little bed, kiss his forehead, then collapse on the couch because she was too tired to walk to her own room. Vivian loved her son. That was never in question, but love does not pay the bills, and a young child cannot stay home alone. So, Vivian found Miss Pearl. Miss Pearl Jenkins lived 3 blocks away in a ground floor apartment with the window box full of flowers. She had raised 6 children of her own, all grown now. Her husband had passed a while before and she needed money. Not a lot, just enough to keep the lights on and the flowers watered. Vivian could not afford much. $40 a week. That is what she offered. Miss Pearl looked at her, looked at the little boy hiding behind his mother's leg, and said, "Bring him by tomorrow morning." That first day, Reed would not let go of his mother's hand. He stood in Miss Pearl's doorway, eyes wide, bottom lip trembling. Vivian knelt down and told him to be good. Then she left for work, and Reed stood there frozen. Miss Pearl did not rush him. She sat down in her old rocking chair and started humming a gospel hymn, low and slow, the kind of sound that fills a room like warm water filling a bathtub. After a while, Reed took a step inside, then another, then he sat on the floor near her feet, and Miss Pearl just kept humming. By the end of that first week, Reed was following Miss Pearl around her apartment like a shadow. She talked to him while she cooked, explained everything she was doing. "You see this baby? You got to let the onion sweat before you add the garlic. Patience. Everything good takes patience." She taught him how to crack an egg without getting shell in the bowl. She taught him how to fold laundry into neat little squares. She read to him every afternoon, old picture books she had kept from her own children. And every night before Vivian came to pick him up, Miss Pearl would hold his face in both her hands and say the same thing. "You do not have to be rich to be somebody, baby. You just have to be kind." Reed heard that sentence 1,000 times over the following years. 1,000 times. And every single time it landed somewhere deeper inside him. Miss Pearl became his world. His mother worked all day, his father was gone, but Miss Pearl was always there. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon and fried chicken and old books. It smelled like safety, like home. She taught him to read before he started kindergarten. She helped him with his homework when the schools got harder. She told him stories about her own life, about growing up poor in rural Georgia, about picking cotton as a little girl, about the day she saw Martin Luther King speak on television and knew the world could change. "People going to look at you and see a poor black boy from the wrong side of Atlanta," she told him once. He was about 9 then. "But you know what I see? I see a king, and do not you ever let nobody tell you different." Those words, those simple, powerful words, they planted something in Reed that would grow for the rest of his life. For the following years, Miss Pearl was his anchor, his teacher, his grandmother, his best friend, the one person who made him feel like he was not invisible. Then Vivian got sick. It started with a cough that would not go away, then the weight loss, then the hospital visits that got longer and longer. Vivian was diagnosed with lung cancer. She had no insurance. The treatment was expensive, and before long, she was gone. Reed was still a boy. He remembered the day the social worker came to the apartment, told him to pack a bag. He asked where he was going. The woman said foster care. He asked if he could stay with Miss Pearl instead. The woman shook her head. "She is not a legal guardian." "I am sorry, sweetie." Reed ran to Miss Pearl's apartment, banged on her door. When she opened it, he threw himself into her arms and sobbed, "They are taking me away, Miss Pearl. Please do not let them take me." Miss Pearl held him so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his cheek. She was crying too. "I'm going to fight for you, baby. I promise. I'm going to fight." But she could not. She had no legal standing, no money for a lawyer, no way to navigate a system that did not care about an old woman with empty pockets and a full heart. The social worker came back the next morning. Reed climbed into the car with his small bag. He pressed his face against the window and watched Miss Pearl standing on the sidewalk, getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared. He never saw her again. And the world he had known, the world of cinnamon and gospel hymns and someone who believed he was a king, vanished with her. That was long ago. And Reed Harlan had spent every single one of those years carrying Miss Pearl in his chest like a second heartbeat. Now, here is what was happening to Miss Pearl during all those years. And this part is hard to tell because the world was not kind to Pearl Jenkins. After Reed was taken away, Miss Pearl tried to get him back. She called social services, she went to the county office, she wrote letters. But the system moved slow and Miss Pearl had no power to move it faster. Eventually, a caseworker told her the boy had been placed with a family in Savannah. No, she could not have the address. No, she could not visit. Case closed. Miss Pearl sat on her apartment steps that evening and cried until she had nothing left. But she kept going because that is what Miss Pearl did. She had spent her whole life keeping going. She found work with another family, then another, then another. For many years, Miss Pearl Jenkins raised other people's children. She rocked them to sleep. She packed their lunches. She wiped their tears and tied their shoes and taught them to be kind. Family after family, child after child, and none of them ever came back to find her. That is the truth about domestic work in America. The women who raise our children, who hold our families together, they are among the most invisible people in this country. Most work without contracts, without health insurance, without retirement benefits. They pour their hearts into other people's homes. And when they get old, when their backs give out and their hands start shaking, there is nothing waiting for them. No pension, no safety net, no thank you. Miss Pearl was one of them. She worked until her body would not let her anymore. Her knees were gone, her hands ached with arthritis. The family stopped calling. The last family she worked for let her go with 2 weeks' pay and a card that said, "We will miss you." They never called again. Miss Pearl's husband had died years ago. Her savings were small, barely enough to cover a few months of rent. And then there was Lila, Miss Pearl's only daughter. Lila had been a bright girl once. Good grades, big smile, but somewhere in her 20s she fell into the wrong crowd, then the wrong habits, then the addiction swallowed her whole. Miss Pearl tried everything. Rehab programs, prayer, begging, but addiction does not listen to a mother's tears. Lila disappeared into the streets, and the few times she came back only for money. When Miss Pearl had no more to give, Lila stopped coming back at all. So, Miss Pearl was alone, truly alone. The rent went up, her savings went down, she missed 1 month, then 2. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. She packed what she could into 2 garbage bags and walked out of the apartment she had lived in for many years. She sat down on a bench at a bus stop and stared at the street. She was elderly and she had nowhere to go. For some time now, Miss Pearl had been living on the streets of downtown Atlanta. She slept in shelters when there was room, under bridges when there was not. She ate at soup kitchens and food banks and sometimes from the trash cans behind restaurants. Miss Pearl was one of the fastest growing demographics of homelessness in America. Elderly women over 55, often invisible, often forgotten. The kind of people you walk past without seeing. The government counted them in reports that nobody read. The numbers kept climbing, but nobody seemed to notice. And something else was happening to Miss Pearl, something she did not fully understand herself. Her memory was slipping. Not all at once, but in pieces, like pages being torn from a book one at a time. She would forget where she had slept the night before. She would forget what day it was. She would forget names, faces, early stage dementia. That is what a volunteer doctor at a free clinic had told her some time ago. The stress, the malnutrition, the years of sleeping in the cold, it all accelerated the decline. Some days were better than others. On good days, Miss Pearl could remember her daughter's face, her husband's laugh, the smell of her old apartment. On bad days, she could not remember her own last name. And that is why when a man in an expensive suit stopped in front of her on Peachtree Street and looked at her like he had seen a ghost, Miss Pearl Jenkins just smiled and said, "God bless you, sir." She had no idea she was looking at the little boy she had once held in her arms and called a king. The boy who had grown up, built an empire, and never forgotten her voice. One afternoon, the kind of day where the Atlanta heat refuses to let go, even though summer is technically over, Reed had just finished a long board meeting. His driver was waiting out front, but Reed waved him off. He needed to walk, needed to clear his head. The meeting had gone well, a major development deal in Midtown. Everyone was celebrating, but Reed felt nothing. He loosened his tie and started walking down Peachtree Street, past the coffee shops and the office buildings and the tourists taking photos, past the construction sites where his own company was putting up another tower of glass and steel. And then he saw her. She was sitting on the sidewalk near the corner of Peachtree and Baker, her back against a brick wall, a cardboard sign in her lap. Her clothes were worn thin, her shoes had holes in them, and her hands, those hands, they were shaking. Reed slowed down. Something about her face, something about the way she held her head, tilted slightly to the left, like she was listening to music nobody else could hear. He stopped walking. His heart did something it had not done in years. It lurched, like a car hitting a pothole at full speed. He knew that face. He knew it the way you know the face of someone who raised you, not from photos, not from memory, from somewhere deeper, from the bones. It was Miss Pearl, his Miss Pearl. She was older, so much older. Her hair had gone completely white. Her cheeks were sunken. Her eyes had a cloudy quality that had not been there before. But it was her. He was certain of it. The shape of her jaw, the way her lips moved slightly when she was not talking like she was always praying. Reed stood there on the sidewalk for what felt like an hour, but was probably only seconds. His briefcase suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. A man in a business suit bumped his shoulder walking past. "Watch it, buddy." Reed did not hear him. He walked toward her slowly, like approaching a dream he was afraid might dissolve. Miss Pearl looked up at him and smiled. That same gentle smile, worn down by time and weather and years of sleeping in places no human being should have to sleep, but still there, still warm. "God bless you, sir," she said. "Anything you can spare." Her voice, that voice, it hit Reed like a fist to the chest. The same voice that had read him stories, the same voice that had sung gospel hymns in a tiny kitchen while onions sizzled on the stove, the same voice that had told him he was a king. But she was looking at him the way you look at a stranger. No recognition, no spark, nothing. She did not know who he was. Reed's throat closed up. He could not speak. He just stood there, staring at her while the city moved around them like a river parting around two stones. Finally, he managed to get words out. Can I Can I buy you something to eat? Oh, that is very kind of you, Miss Pearl said. You do not have to do that. I want to. Please. He walked to the deli across the street. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely pull his wallet out. He bought 2 sandwiches, a bottle of water, a cup of hot soup even though it was warm outside, because he remembered Miss Pearl always liked soup, even in summer. She used to say soup was medicine for the soul. He brought it all back and sat down beside her on the sidewalk, right there on the dirty concrete, in his expensive suit. He did not care. Miss Pearl took the soup first. She wrapped both hands around the cup like it was something precious. She sipped it slowly and closed her eyes. That is good, she whispered. That is real good. They sat in silence for a moment. Reed tried to steady his breathing, tried to act normal, but his eyes kept studying her face, the lines around her mouth, the way her fingers trembled, the small scar above her left eyebrow that he remembered from childhood. She had told him she got it from a clothesline when she was a girl. You are very kind, Miss Pearl said, looking at him. Most people just walk on by. Have you been out of here long? A while now. I lost track. The days kind of run together after a while. Reed swallowed hard. Do you have any family? Miss Pearl's face changed. A shadow passed over it like a cloud crossing the sun. I have a daughter. Somewhere. We lost touch a long time ago. My fault. Her fault. I do not know anymore. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that nearly broke Reed in half. I used to take care of children. That was my work. My whole life. I raised other people's babies. She smiled, a faraway smile. There was this one little boy. Long time ago now. Reed. Sweetest child I ever knew. His mama worked so hard and he was just this little thing with big eyes and a bigger heart. Reed stopped breathing. I wonder where he is now, Miss Pearl said softly. I hope he is doing okay. I think about him sometimes. More than I probably should. Reed's jaw tightened. He could feel tears building behind his eyes like water pressing against a dam. He dug his fingernails into his palms. I am sure he is doing fine, ma'am, he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. Miss Pearl looked at him, really looked at him. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something old and deep. But then it was gone. The fog rolled back in. You remind me of someone, she said. Then she laughed softly. But I say that to everybody these days. My memory is not what it used to be. Reed stood up. He had to, because if he stayed one more second, he was going to fall apart right there on the sidewalk. He reached into his wallet and pulled out every bill he had. $300. He pressed it into Miss Pearl's hands. Please take this. Oh, honey, that is too much. I cannot. Please. Miss Pearl looked at the money, then at him, and she nodded slowly. God bless you, she said. You are a good man. I can tell. Reed turned and walked away. He mawed it around the corner. He made it to an alley between two buildings, and then his legs gave out. He leaned against the wall and cried. Not quiet tears, not dignified tears, the kind of crying that comes from many years of silence breaking open all at once, like a dam that finally gives way. The woman who had saved him was sleeping on the streets, and she did not even remember his name. That night, Reed did not sleep. He sat in his penthouse staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in his adult life, his money felt like a curse. He had everything. Miss Pearl had nothing. And the distance between those two facts felt like the most obscene thing in the world. Late into the night, he had made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Victor Kane. Victor was a private investigator Reed had used for business matters, background checks on partners, due diligence on acquisitions. But this was not business. Victor, I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Pearl Jenkins. She is elderly, currently homeless, living on the streets near Peachtree and Baker in downtown Atlanta. I need medical history, family connections, how she ended up on the streets, everything. Victor did not ask questions. That is why Reed liked him. I will have something for you by the end of the week. Soon after, the report landed on Reed's desk. It was 14 pages long, and reading it felt like swallowing broken glass. Pearl Jenkins, no fixed address for some time now, previously evicted from an apartment in Vine City after falling behind on rent, no income, no savings, no active bank account. Medical records from a free clinic visit some time ago showed early-stage dementia, untreated type 2 diabetes, severe malnutrition, and chronic joint pain. The volunteer doctor had recommended follow-up care. Miss Pearl never returned. And then there was Lila, Miss Pearl's only daughter, last known address in Birmingham, Alabama. History of substance abuse spanning many years, multiple arrests, 2 stints in rehab. But here was the part that caught Reed's attention. Lila had been clean for some time now. She was working as a kitchen prep cook at a restaurant in Birmingham. She was enrolled in a GED program. She was rebuilding her life, but she had no contact with her mother. The report noted that neighbors said Miss Pearl had refused to tell Lila where she was. The shame. An old woman living on the streets. She could not bear for her daughter to see it. Reed set the report down and stared out his office window. The Atlanta skyline stretched before him. Buildings he owned, projects he had built, billions of dollars of concrete and glass and steel. And somewhere down there on a dirty sidewalk, the woman who had taught him to read was slowly disappearing. I was not going to let that happen. But Reed knew it was not as simple as writing a check. Miss Pearl was proud. She had always been proud. If he showed up and announced who he was and tried to sweep her off the streets, she might refuse. She might be too ashamed. She might shut down completely. And there was Lila, Miss Pearl's daughter, living a few hours away, clean for some time now, but drowning in guilt. Mother and daughter separated by shame on both sides, each one thinking the other had given up. Reed needed a plan, not a scheme, not a manipulation, a real plan, one built on honesty. He would go back to Miss Pearl. He would spend time with her, build trust. And when the moment was right, he would tell her who he was. No tricks, no disguises, just the truth. And he would find Lila, bring her home, give Miss Pearl back the one thing no amount of money could buy, her family. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week. All of them. Sir, you have the Richmond presentation on Friday. The board is expecting. Cancel it. Mr. Harlan, are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. The following day, Reed returned to Peachtree Street. He had changed out of his suit, jeans, a plain gray t-shirt. He carried 2 bags, one filled with hot food from a soul food restaurant he remembered Miss Pearl talking about decades ago. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, mac and cheese. The other bag had bottled water, a warm blanket, and a pair of thick socks. He found Miss Pearl in the same spot. She looked up when she saw him and smiled. The same gentle smile from the day before. Oh, it is you again, the kind man. I brought you some food, Reed said, sitting down beside her. I hope you like soul food. Miss Pearl opened the container and her eyes went wide. Lord have mercy, is that Mama Jean's fried chicken? You know it. Baby, I used to take a little boy there every Friday after school. It was our tradition. She picked up a piece of chicken and took a bite. Her eyes closed. Tastes exactly the same. Reed's heart was hammering. He had remembered Mama Jean's. Every Friday she would spend her own money. Money she did not have to buy him a 2-piece dinner because she said every child deserves something to look forward to. Tell me about him, Reed said carefully. The little boy. Miss Pearl chewed slowly, thoughtfully. His name was Reed. Reed Harlan. Skinny little thing, always asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds sing? How come some people got more than other people? She laughed. I never had all the answers, but he did not care. He just wanted somebody to listen. Sounds like a good kid. The best. Miss Pearl's voice softened. Most of the families I worked for, they treated me like furniture. I was just the help. Come in, watch the kids, do not touch the good china, do not sit on the couch. But Reed, that little boy, looked at me like I was somebody. He used to say I was his real family. She paused, and the sadness crept back into her face. I think about what happened to him. After his mama passed, they took him away and I could not stop it. I tried. Lord knows I tried, but I had no money, no lawyer, nobody who would listen to an old black woman with empty pockets. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That is the thing about this work, about taking care of other people's children. You give them everything you have, your time, your love, your whole heart, and then one day they are gone, and nobody thinks about what happens to you. There is no retirement for women like me. No pension, no insurance. You just work until your body gives out. And then you are on your own. Reed was quiet. He let her words sit in the air between them. What about your daughter? He asked gently. Miss Pearl's face tightened. Lila. She said the name like it hurt to say it. She had problems, bad problems. The kind that swallow a person whole. I spent years trying to save her, spent every penny I had on programs and treatments. None of it worked. She stared at the sidewalk. You know what the worst part is? I spent my whole life raising other people's children, teaching them right from wrong, keeping them safe, and my own daughter, I could not save her. What kind of mother does that make me? A human one, Reed said quietly. Miss Pearl looked at him. Something shifted in her expression. That flicker again, like a candle struggling to stay lit in the wind. You are a good listener, she said. You remind me of somebody, but I cannot quite place it. Reed almost told her right then. The words were right there, sitting on the edge of his tongue like birds ready to fly, but he held back. Not yet. Not like this. She deserved more than a sidewalk confession. He squeezed her hand gently. I am going to come back and see you again. Is that okay? I would like that, Miss Pearl said. I do not get many visitors. Reed stood up and looked at her for a long moment. This woman, this beautiful, broken, extraordinary woman. She had given him everything when he was small, and the world had given her nothing in return. He walked away. and with every step, the decision solidified inside him like concrete setting in a mold. He was going to tell her who he was, but first, there was someone else he needed to find. The following morning, Reed was on a private plane to Birmingham, Alabama. The flight was short. He spent every second of it rehearsing what he was going to say. He still did not know if it would work. Victor had provided Lila's address, a small apartment complex on the south side of the city. Nothing fancy, 2 stories, cracked parking lot, but clean, maintained, the kind of place where people were trying. Reed pulled up in a rental car in the afternoon. He had timed it to catch Lila after her shift at the restaurant. He sat in the car for some time, staring at the building. What was he doing? A billionaire from Atlanta showing up at a stranger's door to talk about her mother? How would that even sound? Who would believe it? But he got out of the car anyway because he had made a promise to himself on that sidewalk. And Reed Harlan did not break promises. He knocked on the door of apartment 214. Footsteps inside, a pause, then the door opened. Just a crack, a chain lock still engaged. A woman's face appeared in the gap. Tired eyes, but clear eyes. Sharp, alert. The look of someone who had learned to be careful because the world had not been gentle with her. Can I help you? Are you Lila Jenkins? The eyes narrowed. Who is asking? My name is Reed Harlan. I am from Atlanta. I know your mother, Miss Pearl. The door did not move, but something changed in Lila's face. A tightening around the mouth, a flash of something in her eyes. Fear, or maybe hope, maybe both. I do not know what you are selling, Lila said, but I am not interested. I am not selling anything. Your mother was my nanny. She raised me when I was a child. I found her recently on the streets of downtown Atlanta. She is homeless, Lila, and she needs help. Silence, long silence. Then the chain lock slid off. The door opened wider. Lila stood there in a kitchen apron, flour on her hands. Her eyes were filling with tears. What did you say? Your mother is living on the streets. She has been out there for some time. Lila's hand went to her mouth. She stepped backward like she had been hit. She bumped into the wall behind her and slid down until she was sitting on the floor. No, 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 no. She was shaking her head. She told me she was fine. The last time we talked, she said she had an apartment. She said she was managing. That was before the eviction, Reed said gently. He crouched down to her level. She did not want you to know. Why? The word came out broken, jagged like a piece of glass. Because she was ashamed. She did not want you to see her like that. Lila pressed her palms against her eyes. Her shoulders heaved. I should have checked on her. I should have gone down there, but I was scared. I was so scared she would look at me and see what I used to be. What you used to be is not who you are now. You do not know what I did to her, the things I said, the money I stole. I stole from my own mother to get high. What kind of person does that? A person who was sick, Reed said, and a person who got better. That is who you are now, Lila. Clean for some time now, working, going to school. Your mother would be proud of that. Lila looked at him through wet eyes. How do you know all this? Who are you? Reed sat down on the floor across from her. 2 people sitting on the floor of a small apartment in Birmingham. A billionaire and a recovering addict. Both of them carrying the same weight. Both of them trying to find their way back to the same woman. Your mother took care of me from the time I was very young until I was older. She taught me how to read. She taught me how to cook. She told me every single day that I did not have to be rich to be somebody. I just had to be kind. He paused. She saved my life, Lila, and right now, she is sitting on a sidewalk in Atlanta with no food, no medicine, and no family. I am going to change that, but I cannot do it alone. She needs you. She does not want to see me. That is not true. She talks about you. She misses you. She blames herself for what happened. She blames herself, Lila's voice broke. It was not her fault. None of it was her fault. I was the one who messed everything up. Then come tell her that. Lila was quiet for a long time. She sat there on the floor, wiping her eyes with her apron, staring at the wall across from her. The apartment was small but neat. A GED study guide on the kitchen table. A calendar with work shifts marked in blue ink. A small plant on the windowsill, green and alive. Evidence of a life being rebuilt. One day at a time. I have been clean for some time now, Lila said finally. I count every single day. Because every day I wake up and I'm not that person anymore, it matters. Reed agreed. But every single one of those days, I think about my mama. Every single one. And I think about the last time she looked at me, the disappointment in her eyes. I think about that look, and it is worse than any withdrawal I ever went through. Come with me to Atlanta, Reed said. Come see her. Tell her what you just told me. What if she turns me away? She will not. How can you be so sure? Reed thought about Miss Pearl sitting on that sidewalk, talking about the little boy she once loved, wondering where he was, hoping he was okay. A woman who had lost everything, but still had room in her heart to worry about someone else's child. Because I know your mother, Reed said, And there is not a version of her that exists in any condition, in any place, that would not want her daughter back. Lila closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek and landed on the flour-dusted apron. "Okay," she whispered. "Take me to my mama." While Lila was packing her things in Birmingham, Reed was back in Atlanta, moving fast. He wanted everything ready. He did not buy a mansion. He did not rent some flashy condo in Buckhead. Instead, he found a small two-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood in West End. Ground floor. Big windows. A little porch with room for a rocking chair. He chose it carefully. Miss Pearl had never lived in luxury. Putting her in a penthouse would feel like dropping her on another planet. She needed something that felt like home. Something warm. Something real. He went shopping himself. Did not send an assistant. Did not hire a decorator. He walked through the stores and picked out every single item with his own hands. A set of heavy-bottom cooking pots, the good kind. Cast iron, the kind Miss Pearl used to cook with in her tiny kitchen many years ago. A wooden cutting board, a spice rack filled with everything he remembered her using, garlic powder, paprika, cayenne, thyme. He bought bed sheets, soft ones, the kind that feel like clouds when you have been sleeping on concrete. He bought thick towels and a bathrobe and slippers with rubber soles so she would not slip. And then he went to a used bookstore. He spent an hour going through the children's section until he found them. The same picture books Miss Pearl used to read to him. Corduroy, The Snowy Day, Stevie. He bought every copy they had. He placed the books on a small shelf next to the bed. And when he stepped back and looked at them sitting there, spines cracked and pages yellowed with age, something inside his chest squeezed so tight he had to sit down. What most people do not realize is that homelessness itself accelerates cognitive decline. The constant stress of having nowhere safe to sleep, the malnutrition, the dehydration, the fear, it ages the brain faster than almost anything else. Studies show that people experiencing chronic homelessness develop conditions like dementia at rates far higher than the general population, and they develop them younger. Miss Pearl had been on the streets for some time. Every day out there had stolen a little more of her memory, a little more of her past, a little more of herself. Reed was determined to get as much of it back as possible. He called Dr. Sophia Ellis, one of the top geriatric specialists in Atlanta. He explained the situation. Dr. Ellis cleared her schedule for the following week. He contacted a nutritionist who specialized in recovery from malnutrition. He arranged for a diabetes specialist. He set up a pharmacy account so Miss Pearl's medications would be delivered directly to the apartment. He put fresh flowers on the kitchen table, sunflowers because Miss Pearl used to keep sunflowers in a jar on her windowsill. He remembered that. He remembered everything. The apartment was ready. The doctors were scheduled. The books were on the shelf, and the pots were in the kitchen, and the sunflowers were on the table. Now came the hard part. A couple of days later, Reed returned to Peachtree Street. This time, he did not bring food. He did not bring money. He brought something much heavier. The truth. Miss Pearl was in her usual spot. She looked up when she saw him, and that familiar smile spread across her face. "There he is, my kind friend. I was hoping you would come back today." Reed sat down beside her. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. He had rehearsed this moment many times in his head, but now that it was here, every word he prepared felt wrong. "Miss Pearl," he said, "I need to tell you something." "You sound serious," she said. "You okay, honey?" Reed took a breath, then another, then he started talking. "When I was very young, a woman taught me how to crack an egg without getting shell in the bowl. She told me you had to be gentle, patient, that everything good takes patience." Miss Pearl's smile faded slightly. Something stirred behind her eyes. "When I was a little older, that same woman read me a book called The Snowy Day. So many times I had it memorized. I used to pretend the boy in the book was me, walking through the snow, making tracks." Miss Pearl's hand went to her chest. "When I was still a boy, she told me that people were going to look at me and see a poor black boy from the wrong side of Atlanta. But she said she saw something different. She said she saw a king." Miss Pearl's lips were trembling now. Her clouded eyes were searching his face, searching hard, like someone trying to read a sign through heavy rain. "And every single day," Reed continued, his voice breaking, "every single day for those years, she held my face in her hands and told me the same thing. You do not have to be rich to be somebody, baby. You just have to be kind." The words hung in the air between them like a held breath. Miss Pearl stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Her hands were shaking. "No," she whispered. "No, it cannot be. It is me, Miss Pearl." "Reed." Her voice was barely a sound, a breath given shape. "My little Reed." "Yes, ma'am." Miss Pearl's face crumbled. Not slowly, all at once, like a wall that had been holding back an ocean for many years, suddenly giving way. The tears came and came hard. Her whole body shook with sobs that sounded like they were being pulled from somewhere deep inside her. "Oh my God. Oh my baby." Oh, my sweet baby. Reed could not hold it together anymore either. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. And they sat there on that dirty sidewalk, a billionaire and a homeless woman holding each other like the world had ended and they were the only two people left. Miss Pearl's thin fingers gripped the back of his shirt. She held on like she was afraid he would disappear again, like she was afraid this was a dream and she would wake up alone on the concrete. I looked for you, she sobbed. I called and called. They would not tell me where they took you. I know, I know. I wanted to keep you. I wanted to fight for you, but I had nothing. Nothing. You gave me everything, Reed said, and his voice cracked wide open on the last word. People were stopping on the sidewalk now. A woman with a stroller paused and put her hand over her mouth. A delivery man set down his packages and just watched. A teenager, recording something on his phone, lowered it and stood still. Something about the scene made people stop. Two people clinging to each other on the ground. The raw sound of grief and joy colliding. Miss Pearl pulled back and looked at his face. Really looked. She reached up with both trembling hands and held his cheeks, the same way she used to. The same gesture she had made 1,000 times when he was small. Look at you, she whispered. Look at what you became. Because of you, Reed said. All of it. Because of you. They held each other for a long time. Neither one spoke. The city moved around them. Cars honked. People walked. The world kept going. But right there, on that patch of sidewalk, time had stopped. Then Miss Pearl pulled back and the light in her eyes shifted. The joy was still there, but now something else crept in alongside it. Something darker. Shame. She looked down at her clothes, her torn shoes, her dirty fingernails. She looked at the cardboard sign sitting next to her, and then she looked back at Reed, at his clean clothes, his healthy face, his expensive watch. And she started to pull away. You should not be here, she said quietly. You should not see me like this. Miss Pearl, do not. Look at me, Reed. Look at what I have become. I am sitting on the ground begging for change. And you built yourself into something. I do not want you to remember me this way. She tried to stand up. Her knees buckled. Reed caught her arm. I am not leaving, he said firmly. You should. You have a life. An important life. You do not need some old woman from the past dragging you down. Dragging me down? Reed's voice was steady now. The tears were still on his face, but underneath them was something solid, something unbreakable. Miss Pearl, you are the reason I have a life. You taught me how to read. You taught me how to cook. You taught me that I mattered when every single thing around me said I did not. That was a long time ago. It was yesterday. It was this morning. It is right now. I carry your words with me every single day, every board meeting, every negotiation. Every time I want to give up, I hear your voice. You do not have to be rich to be somebody. You just have to be kind. Miss Pearl was crying again, but differently now, quieter. The sobs had given way to something deeper, a slow, steady stream of tears that came from a place beyond sadness, beyond joy, from that place where the two things meet and become something else entirely. I do not need charity, Reed. I have survived this long on my own. This is not charity. Then what is it? It is family. He said it simply. The way you say something that does not need decoration. That just is. You are my family, you always were, and family takes care of each other. Here is what people do not understand about homelessness. When someone has been on the streets long enough, accepting help becomes almost impossible. It is not stubbornness, it is not pride. Exactly. It is something deeper than that. When the world has taken everything from you, the only thing you have left is your independence, your ability to survive on your own terms. Accepting help means admitting you cannot do it anymore. And that feels like losing the last piece of yourself. Miss Pearl was caught in that trap. She had survived for some time on the streets through sheer willpower. Accepting Reed's help meant admitting she was broken, and she had spent her whole life being strong for other people. But Reed understood this because he understood her. Miss Pearl, he said gently, I am not asking you to let me save you. I am asking you to let me be your family again. I need you in my life. I have needed you for many years. You do not need me, Miss Pearl said, her voice thin. Look at everything you have done without me. I have done it all without you, and it has been empty. Every success, every milestone, empty. Because the one person I wanted to share it with was not there. Miss Pearl looked at him for a long time. The clouds in her eyes seemed to clear just for a moment. And in that moment, she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, the little boy who used to sit on her kitchen floor and ask why the sky was blue. You really need me? She asked, barely above a whisper. More than you know. Miss Pearl was quiet. A pigeon landed near them and pecked at a crumb on the sidewalk. The afternoon sun was moving behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the street. Okay, she said finally. Okay, baby, I will come with you. Reed exhaled, a breath he felt like he had been holding for many years. But I am not moving into some fancy place, Miss Pearl added, a tiny flash of her old stubbornness returning. I do not need marble floors and champagne. Reed smiled, the first real smile he had smiled in as long as he could remember. No marble floors, he promised, just a kitchen with good pots and a shelf full of picture books. Miss Pearl looked at him, and despite everything, despite the dementia and the years and the concrete and the cold, she laughed, a real laugh, the kind that starts deep in the belly and rises up like warm bread. You remember the books. I remember everything, Miss Pearl. Everything. The next morning, Reed brought a car to Peachtree Street. Not a limousine, a simple sedan. Miss Pearl was waiting for him with her few belongings in a plastic bag. She looked nervous, like a child on the first day of school. The drive to West End was short. Miss Pearl sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window. She did not say much, just watched the city go by. When they pulled up to the apartment building, Miss Pearl studied it carefully. It was modest, brick, clean. A small porch with a rocking chair that Reed had placed there that morning. "This is it?" she asked. "This is it." They walked inside and Miss Pearl stopped in the doorway. The apartment was small, warm. Sunlight came through the big windows and fell across the hardwood floors like honey. There were sunflowers on the kitchen table, a rocking chair in the living room, and, on a shelf beside the bed, a row of picture books with worn spines and yellowed pages. Miss Pearl walked slowly through the rooms, her hand trailing along the walls. She touched the kitchen counter. She opened a cabinet and saw the cast iron pots. She picked one up and held it in both hands like she was holding something sacred. Then she saw the books. She pulled The Snowy Day from the shelf and pressed it to her chest. She stood there in the middle of the bedroom holding that old picture book, and she cried. But these were different tears, not the tears of the sidewalk, not the tears of recognition or shame. These were the tears of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for and was remembering. "You did all this?" she whispered. "Yes, ma'am." The pots, the sunflowers, the books, you remembered all of it. Every bit. Miss Pearl sat down on the bed. She ran her hand across the sheets. Soft, clean. She looked around the room and something in her face shifted. The tension she had been carrying in her shoulders for years, the hypervigilance of someone who sleeps with one eye open began to loosen. "I have not slept in a real bed in some time," she said softly. "I forgot what it feels like." Reed sat down beside her. "You are safe now." Over the next few days, things moved slowly. Reed did not rush anything. He brought Dr. Sophia Ellis to the apartment so Miss Pearl would not have to go to a strange hospital. The doctor was gentle, patient. She examined Miss Pearl thoroughly and started her on medication for the dementia and the diabetes. She set up a treatment plan. A nutritionist came twice that first week. She worked with Miss Pearl on meals, making sure she was getting what her body had been starved of for years: protein, vitamins, iron. The basics that most people take for granted, but that disappear entirely when you are living on the streets. Miss Pearl was quiet at first, adjusting. She would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and forget where she was. She would stand in the hallway, confused, until the sunflowers on the table brought her back. But slowly, day by day, something began to return. Not just her health, her spirit. One evening, Reed came to the apartment after work. He was still in his suit, loosening his tie as he walked up to the porch. And before he even opened the door, he smelled it. Onions sweating in butter, garlic hitting a hot pan, the slow, deep scent of chicken simmering in a cast iron pot. He opened the door and there was Miss Pearl, standing in the kitchen, apron on, wooden spoon in hand, humming a gospel hymn low and slow. The same sound he had heard on the very first day his mother brought him to her apartment many years ago. She turned around and smiled. "Sit down, baby. Dinner is almost ready." Reed sat at the small kitchen table. He watched her cook, the way she moved around the kitchen like she was dancing, the way she tasted the broth and added a pinch more salt, the way she talked to the food like it could hear her. "Come on now, do not burn on me." And when she set the plate down in front of him, fried chicken and collard greens and cornbread and mac and cheese made from scratch, made with love, made with hands that still remembered even when the mind sometimes forgot, Reed took one bite and the taste hit him like a freight train. It was the same, exactly the same flavor from a tiny kitchen in East Atlanta many years ago, the same meal that had made a scared little boy feel like he was home. "Miss Pearl," he said, his voice thick, "it tastes exactly the same." Miss Pearl sat down across from him and folded her hands. "Some things do not change, baby. The recipe remembers even when I forget." They ate together in the small kitchen with the sunflowers on the table and the picture books on the shelf. And for the first time in many years, Reed Harlan did not eat alone. Reed had not told Miss Pearl that Lila was coming. He wanted to, but something told him that if Miss Pearl knew, the anxiety would eat her alive, the waiting, the wondering. What if Lila changed her mind at the last minute? What if the plane got delayed? What if... Better to let it happen naturally. Lila arrived in Atlanta one morning. Reed picked her up at the airport himself. She stepped off the plane carrying a small duffel bag and wearing the same kitchen apron she had had on when he first knocked on her door. She had not even realized she was still wearing it until she got to the gate. The drive to West End was quiet. Lila sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded tight in her lap, staring at the road ahead. She looked like she was heading to a trial, which in a way she was, the trial of facing the person she had hurt most in this world. What if she does not want to see me? Lila asked again. She does. You do not know that. I do. They pulled up to the apartment. Reed turned off the engine. Lila did not move. She just sat there gripping her duffel bag like a life preserver. I cannot do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. What do I even say? I am sorry I stole from you. I am sorry I disappeared for years. I am sorry I chose drugs over my own mother. Reed turned to face her. You say whatever your heart tells you to say, and then you let her respond. That is all you can do. Lila closed her eyes, took a deep breath. Then she opened the car door. They walked up the path to the front porch. Reed could see through the window that Miss Pearl was in the kitchen. She was doing what she always did in the afternoons now. Cooking, humming, coming back to life one recipe at a time. Reed knocked on the door. Footsteps inside, the lock turning, the door opening. Miss Pearl stood there in her apron, a wooden spoon in one hand, a smile already forming on her face because she thought it was just Reed coming for dinner. Then she saw Lila. The spoon fell from her hand and clattered on the floor. The smile did not fade. It shattered. And what replaced it was something beyond words, beyond expression. It was the face of a mother seeing her lost child, the face of every prayer she had ever whispered in the dark being answered all at once. Lila. Miss Pearl's voice was barely a breath. Baby. Lila crumbled right there on the porch. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. The tears came so fast and so hard that she could not speak. She opened her mouth and nothing came out except a sound that was not quite a word, a sound that was older than language, the sound a child makes when they finally come home. Mama, Mama, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything. Miss Pearl did not hesitate, not for 1 second. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her daughter and pulled her inside. They sank to the floor together right there in the hallway, holding each other so tight it looked like they were trying to merge into one person. My baby, Miss Pearl kept saying. My baby girl. Reed stepped inside quietly and closed the door behind him. He stood in the corner of the living room watching. He did not say a word. This was not his moment. This belonged to them. Lila was sobbing into her mother's shoulder. Her words came out in pieces, broken, jagged, like glass she had been carrying inside her for years and was finally letting fall. I stole from you, Mama. I took your money. I took your jewelry. I sold your wedding ring for $40. Miss Pearl held her tighter. I said terrible things to you. I told you I hated you. I told you I wished you were not my mother. Shh, now. And then I left. I just left and I did not come back and you were out here alone on the streets and I did not even know. Miss Pearl pulled back and held Lila's face in both hands, the same way she used to hold Reed's face, the same gesture she had made 1,000 times for 1,000 different children, but this time it was her own. Look at me, Miss Pearl said. Her voice was firm now, steady. The fog in her eyes had cleared. In this moment, she was completely present, completely herself. Lila Marie Jenkins. Look at me. Lila looked up. You came back, Miss Pearl said. That is all that matters. You came back. But I do not care about the money. I do not care about the ring. I do not care about what you said or what you did. None of that matters now. What matters is you are standing in front of me, clean, alive, here. Recovery from addiction is not just about the substance. It is about everything the substance destroyed along the way. The relationships, the trust, the years that were lost. Experts say that rebuilding family bonds after addiction takes time, sometimes longer. Sometimes it never happens at all, because forgiveness is not a single act. It is a process, a daily choice to keep choosing love over resentment. Miss Pearl had made that choice before Lila even walked through the door. She had made it many years ago, sitting on the sidewalk, lying under bridges, eating from soup kitchens. Even in her darkest moments, Miss Pearl had never stopped loving her daughter. She had been angry, she had been heartbroken, but she had never stopped. How long have you been clean? Miss Pearl asked softly. I count every single day. Miss Pearl smiled, a real smile, the first one in this conversation that was not mixed with pain. You count the days, every single one. Then you are stronger than you know, baby. They sat on the floor for a long time. Lila told her mother everything, the rehab, the relapses, the final time she got clean and knew it had to stick, the job at the restaurant, the GED classes, the small apartment in Birmingham where she was learning how to live like a normal person for the first time in her adult life. Miss Pearl listened. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. She just held her daughter's hand and listened. I was so scared to come here, Lila said. I thought you would hate me. I could never hate you. I am your mother. And a mother's love does not have conditions. Reed quietly slipped out the front door and sat on the porch. He could still hear them through the open window. The murmur of voices, the occasional sob breaking through, the long stretches of silence that said more than words ever could. He looked out at the quiet street. The afternoon sun was going down. The sunflowers Miss Pearl had planted on the porch recently were beginning to bloom. And for the first time since he had found Miss Pearl on that sidewalk, Reed felt like everything was going to be okay. Sometime later, you would not have recognized Pearl Jenkins. Her cheeks had filled out, her eyes were clearer, the trembling in her hands had steadied. Dr. Ellis had put her on a treatment plan for the dementia, and while the condition could not be reversed, the decline had slowed dramatically. With proper nutrition, regular sleep, and reduced stress, Miss Pearl's brain was recovering what it could. She had good days and bad days, but the good days were starting to outnumber the bad ones. Lila had moved to Atlanta. She found a small apartment minutes from her mother's place. Reed had connected her with a program that helped people in recovery find stable employment. Not a handout, a hand up. Lila got a job as a prep cook at a restaurant in Midtown. Better pay, better hours, a manager who understood her history and gave her a chance anyway. Every Sunday morning, Lila walked to Miss Pearl's apartment. They cooked breakfast together. Eggs and grits and bacon, coffee in mugs that did not match. They talked about nothing and everything. The weather, a show Miss Pearl liked on television, a recipe Lila had learned at work. Small things, normal things, the kind of things that mothers and daughters are supposed to talk about, but had not in years. Miss Pearl had also started volunteering. Twice a week, she went to a community childcare center in her neighborhood. She did not get paid. She did not need to. She just showed up and did what she had always done. She held babies, she read picture books to toddlers. She wiped noses and tied shoes and told every single child that they mattered. The staff at the center loved her. The children adored her. They called her Miss Pearl. And every time she heard that name from a small voice, something inside her clicked back into place, like a piece of a puzzle finding its way home. Reed came to Miss Pearl's apartment every Thursday evening. Their tradition, he would bring ingredients, she would cook, they would eat together at the small kitchen table with the sunflowers. And Miss Pearl began to remember things. Not everything, not all the time, but in flashes. Bright moments that cut through the fog like sunlight through clouds. One evening, while they were washing dishes side by side, Miss Pearl suddenly stopped. You used to cry when your mama left for work, she said. Every single morning, you would stand at the window and watch her car drive away. And then you would come to me and put your head on my lap, and I would hum until you stopped. Reed's hands went still in the soapy water. He had forgotten that, completely forgotten. But the moment she said it, it came flooding back. The cold window glass against his forehead, the sound of his mother's car engine fading, the warmth of Miss Pearl's lap. You remember that. Some things the mind forgets, but the heart keeps. On another evening, Miss Pearl brought out something she had been keeping in her bedside drawer, a small worn envelope. She placed it on the table in front of Reed. What is this? He asked. Open it. Inside was a photograph, small, creased, faded. A little boy sitting on a kitchen counter with a huge grin, missing 2 front teeth, holding a wooden spoon, flour all over his face. Reed stared at it. His chest tightened. That is me, he whispered. You were helping me make cornbread, Miss Pearl said. You got more flour on yourself than in the bowl, but you were so proud. I kept it in my wallet for many years. When I lost the apartment, I put it in my shoe so it would not get stolen, carried it everywhere, through shelters, under bridges. I did not always remember your name, but I always remembered your face. Reed held the photograph in both hands like it was made of glass. The image was barely visible. Decades of being folded and unfolded, carried and hidden, pressed against skin and soaked with rain. But the little boy's smile was still there, still shining through the damage. She had kept his photo in her shoe while she slept on the streets, while she lost her memory, while the world forgot about her. She never forgot about him. Miss Pearl, he said, but he could not finish the sentence. He just held the photo and let the tears fall onto the table. Miss Pearl reached over and put her hand on his. You were always my boy, Reed, even when I could not remember why. Something was happening to Reed Harlan, slowly, quietly, like ice melting at the edges of a river. The man who had built walls around his heart, who had eaten dinner alone for many years, who had measured every human interaction by what it could produce, that man was changing. It started small. He noticed things he had not noticed before. His assistant, Carla, who had worked for him for many years, he had never asked her about her family. Turned out she was raising 3 kids on her own. Her husband had passed away some time ago. She came to work every day early because the early shift meant she could pick her kids up from school. Reed had never known, never thought to ask. He started asking, not in a corporate way, not performance reviews and feedback sessions, just asking. How are you? How are your kids? Is there anything you need? The first time he did it, Carla looked at him like he had sprouted a second head. Are you feeling okay, Mr. Harlan? I am fine, Carla. I am trying to be better. It spread through the company like a warm current. Reed started a program for employees with caregiving responsibilities, flexible hours, backup childcare, emergency funds for unexpected medical bills. It was not a massive corporate initiative. It was just a man who had finally remembered what Miss Pearl taught him, that people matter more than profit. And then he decided to go bigger. He sat in his office one evening looking at the photograph Miss Pearl had given him, the little boy with flour on his face. And he thought about all the other Miss Pearls out there, all the women who had spent their lives raising other people's children, cooking other people's meals, cleaning other people's homes, and had nothing to show for it when they got old. In America, the vast majority of domestic workers have no retirement benefits, no pension, no employer match savings plan. Many are paid in cash, which means no Social Security contributions. The National Domestic Workers Alliance estimates that only about 1 in 10 domestic workers has any form of retirement savings. When they can no longer work, they fall through every crack in the system. Invisible in life, invisible in old age. Miss Pearl had fallen through those cracks. Millions of others were falling right now. Reed picked up his phone and called his legal team. I want to set up a foundation, a real one, fully funded. I wanted to provide housing assistance, medical care, and retirement support for elderly domestic workers and caregivers who have aged out of the workforce. There was a pause on the other end. That is going to be expensive, Mr. Harlan. I do not care. Make it happen. What would you like to call it? Reed looked at the photograph one more time. The Pearl Foundation. That evening, he drove to Miss Pearl's apartment. She was on the porch in her rocking chair watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lila was inside making tea. Miss Pearl, I have something to tell you. Sit down, baby. You look like you have got a lot on your mind. He sat in the chair beside her. I am starting a foundation, a charity. It is going to help women like you, women who spent their lives taking care of other people's families and got nothing in return. Housing, medical care, a safety net so that nobody else ends up where you ended up. Miss Pearl was quiet. She rocked slowly in her chair. The sunset reflected in her eyes. What are you calling it? The Pearl Foundation. Miss Pearl stopped rocking. She turned to look at him and her face did that thing again. That thing where it seemed to hold everything at once. Joy and sadness and gratitude and disbelief all layered on top of each other like sheets of glass. You named it after me. There is nobody else I would rather name it after. Miss Pearl's eyes filled with tears. She reached over and took his hand, held it tight the way she used to hold it when she walked him to school many years ago. You are still that same sweet boy, Reed, she said softly. You always were. One evening, Reed pulled up to Miss Pearl's apartment. The air was cool, the kind of cool that makes you grateful for warm places and warm people. He could see the light on in the kitchen before he even got out of the car, and he could smell it through the cracked window. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread rising in the oven, the same meal, always the same meal, and it never got old. Lila opened the door. She was wearing an apron, flour on her hands. She had been helping Miss Pearl cook, something she had never done as a child but was learning now, making up for lost time. She has been cooking since this afternoon, Lila said with a smile. Would not let me do anything except peel the potatoes. Reed walked into the kitchen. Miss Pearl was standing at the stove, stirring something in her cast iron pot, humming that same gospel hymn, low and slow, the sound that had been the backdrop of his childhood. She turned around and smiled. There he is, right on time. Sit down, baby. It is almost ready. The table was small, 3 chairs, 3 plates, 3 mismatched glasses, nothing fancy, nothing expensive. But as Reed sat down and looked at the 2 women in this kitchen, he realized something. This was the richest table he had ever sat at. Miss Pearl still had her bad days, mornings where the fog rolled in and she could not remember what month it was. Afternoons where she called Reed by his mother's name. The dementia had not gone away. It was still there underneath everything, like a tide that pulled back but never disappeared. And Lila was still healing, still counting her days, still waking up every morning and choosing to stay clean, still carrying the weight of everything she had done even as she learned to set it down. Nothing was perfect, nothing was fixed, but they were here together. And that was enough. Miss Pearl brought the food to the table. She sat down and reached out both hands. Reed took one, Lila took the other. Miss Pearl bowed her head. Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for bringing my children home. Both of them. When she looked up, her eyes were clear, fully present. And she looked at Reed with the same expression she had given him 1,000 times in that tiny apartment in East Atlanta. You do not have to be rich to be somebody, baby, she said. You just have to be kind. Reed squeezed her hand. You made me rich, Miss Pearl, long before I made my first dollar. Miss Pearl smiled. Lila wiped her eyes with her apron. And the three of them ate dinner together in the small apartment with the sunflowers on the table and the picture books on the shelf. The people who raise us, the nannies, the caregivers, the grandmothers, the neighbors who step in when nobody else will, they are the most important people in our lives, and they are almost always the ones we forget. They work in our homes, they hold our children, they shape the human beings we become. And when their work is done, when their bodies give out and their savings run dry, the world looks the other way. But their fingerprints are on everything we are, every act of kindness we show, every moment of patience we practice, every time we choose love over indifference. That came from someone who probably never got thanked. Do not wait. Do not wait until it is too late to find them. Do not wait until they are sitting on a sidewalk with a cardboard sign. If there is someone who shaped you, someone who loved you when they did not have to, reach out today, not tomorrow, today. Because sometimes the smallest act of remembering is the greatest act of love. Now, I want to be real with you for a moment. This story is fictional. Reed is not a real person. Miss Pearl is not a real person. But the problems in this story are very real. Elderly homelessness in America is rising every year, and the women who spend their lives as domestic workers, nannies, housekeepers, caregivers, the vast majority of them retire with nothing. No pension, no savings, no safety net. That is not fiction. That is fact. I wrote this story because I believe the people who raise us deserve to be remembered, not just in our hearts, but in our systems, in our laws, in the way we build a society. Whether it was a nanny, a grandmother, a neighbor, or a teacher, someone shaped who you are. Someone gave you their time when they could have given it to someone else. And that gift, that invisible, unpaid, unrecognized gift, it changed the course of your life. If you want to learn more or help, look into organizations like the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Look into your local programs for elderly homelessness. Even a small donation or a few hours of volunteering can make a difference. And if there is someone in your past who loved you like Miss Pearl loved Reed, find them, call them, tell them what they meant to you. You might be surprised how much it means to hear it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness matters. See you in the next one. Love you.